For years, Reggie had been the forgotten soul of the animal shelter, an unwelcome shadow lingering in the corners of Kennel 19. With his scruffy fur, mismatched eyes, and aged appearance, he seemed to radiate an aura of neglect that discouraged potential adopters. Week after week, countless families passed by his kennel, their eyes scanning the rows of playful puppies and vibrant kittens, while Reggie remained unnoticed, hidden behind the cold metal bars of his enclosure. The staff often whispered among themselves about how long he had been there, their voices tinged with pity and resignation. Some days it felt as though Reggie was cursed. No matter how hard he tried to catch someone's attention, his efforts went unnoticed. The shelter workers had even stopped giving him a daily walk, assuming that no one would miss him if he remained cooped up. It was as if Reggie had become invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of a world that had forgotten his existence. When I arrived at the shelter that day, I wasn't looking for Reggie. My goal was simple: find a dog that was easy to love, one with a playful demeanor and a friendly face that would instantly win over anyone who met it. But as soon as I stood in front of Kennel 19, something shifted. The moment I locked eyes with Reggie, I felt an inexplicable pull, a mix of fear and curiosity that I couldn't explain. His fur was a chaotic blend of grays and tans, his mismatched eyes piercing yet unreadable. He didn't bark or jump like the other dogs, nor did he cower in fear. Instead, he simply watched me, his expression as calm as it was unsettling. The tag on his collar caught my attention immediately. It wasn't your typical ID tag, it was worn brass, round like a coin, with words etched into its surface. As I leaned closer, squinting to make out the text, the words struck me like a punch to the gut. If you're reading this, I was loved once. A lump formed in my throat, and I froze. The phrase wasn't just cryptic, it felt like a challenge. Why would someone leave such a profound message on a dog's collar? Was this a desperate plea, or was it a reminder of what had been lost? Whatever the intent, it hooked me. I couldn't tear my gaze away from Reggie, not even when the staff member called out to me, warning about the difficult dogs in the shelter. Part of me wanted to walk away. I'd volunteered at enough shelters to know what different meant. Different meant the dog had been here too long. Different meant the staff had run out of excuses for why no one had adopted him. Different meant Reggie was likely damaged in some way, mentally or emotionally, and that scared me. But another part of me, a stubborn, irrational part, insisted that Reggie was worth the risk. Maybe it was the tag. Maybe it was the way his cloudy eyes sparkled with an intensity I couldn't ignore. Or maybe it was the quiet resolve in his stance. Whatever it was, I stayed frozen in place, staring at him like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. At first, Reggie did not respond to me at all. He simply stood there, unmoving, his expression as neutral as if he were inspecting the wallpaper. When I extended my hand toward him, hoping for some sign of acknowledgement, he didn't flinch, didn't wag his tail, didn't even blink. It was as though I didn't exist. This silence, this absolute lack of reaction, cut deeper than I expected. I had hoped for a spark of recognition, a wag of the tail, anything to prove that Reggie understood or at least cared, that someone was trying to reach him. Instead, I felt like an intruder, unworthy of his attention. Doubts began to creep into my mind. Did Reggie even comprehend affection? Was he too broken to feel anything? The thought haunted me as I watched him stare blankly into space, his tail hanging limp at his side. One afternoon, after several days of this frustrating standoff, I decided to try again. I brought him a tennis ball, the kind that had once belonged to Rusty. I rolled it across the floor, expecting it to elicit some kind of response. To my dismay, Reggie barely reacted. He watched the ball roll past him, his ears twitching faintly, but he made no move to chase it. My frustration boiled over. I shouted his name louder than I intended, hoping to provoke some kind of reaction. Again, nothing. The tennis ball sat motionless on the carpet, a stark reminder of my failure to connect with him. That night, I sat on the couch, stewing in disappointment. I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. What if Reggie truly didn't care? What if he was destined to remain this way forever? But then something unexpected happened. Early the next morning, I heard a faint sound, a soft thump followed by the rustle of fur. I sat up abruptly, heart pounding. There, in the corner of the living room, Reggie was lying on his side, one leg extended lazily. His tail, which had been still for days, began to wag ever so slightly. It was barely noticeable, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I froze, afraid to move, afraid to break the fragile moment. Slowly, I reached out my hand, letting it hover just above his head. For a split second, I thought he would retreat, but instead, he tilted his head, his cloudy eye locking onto mine. The wag of his tail intensified, just enough to send a ripple of hope through me. That small gesture became the foundation of our relationship. Over time, Reggie taught me that love isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, and requires patience. Every wag of his tail, every cautious step toward me, was a testament to the progress we were making. Though Reggie would never be the boisterous companion I had initially hoped for, he proved to be far more than I ever imagined. In the beginning, Reggie remained distant, his demeanor cold and detached. Days passed without so much as a flicker of emotion crossing his face. Even when I tried to engage with him, offering toys or speaking softly, Reggie seemed oblivious, as though the world beyond his kennel had ceased to exist for him. It was as if he had withdrawn into himself, a fortress built from years of neglect and rejection. I began to doubt whether Reggie could ever open up, whether the spark of connection I hoped for was nothing more than a mirage. Every attempt I made felt futile, and I questioned whether my efforts were doing more harm than good. One ordinary afternoon, however, everything changed. I had been tidying up the living room, lost in thought about the challenges ahead, when I noticed an old tennis ball peeking out from under the couch. It was Rusty's ball, worn and frayed, but still intact. Without much thought, I rolled it across the floor, half expecting it to bounce idly by Reggie's side. To my astonishment, Reggie's ears perked up immediately. His body tensed, and for a moment I feared he might ignore it altogether. But then, ever so slowly, he began to move. Each step was hesitant, as if testing the waters, but his interest was undeniable. As the ball rolled toward him, Reggie watched it intently, his cloudy eye reflecting the motion. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he reached out a paw and nudged the ball back toward me. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it sent a wave of relief through me. For the first time, Reggie had acknowledged my presence. Encouraged, I rolled the ball again, this time farther away. To my delight, Reggie followed it, his movements becoming more confident with each repetition. The moment he retrieved the ball and returned it to me marked a turning point in our relationship. It was as though a dam had burst, releasing something deep within Reggie that had been trapped for too long. From that day onward, he began to show glimpses of the playful spirit that had once defined him. The tennis ball became our shared ritual, a symbol of the bond forming between us. Over time, Reggie's actions evolved from tentative curiosity to genuine engagement, and I realized that the cold exterior he presented was merely a facade masking the warmth beneath. That single interaction taught me an invaluable lesson. Patience is key. Like Reggie, many creatures carry scars that cannot be seen, wounds that require time and understanding to heal. And while Reggie may never fully recover from the trauma of his past, his willingness to trust again was a testament to his resilience. Watching him rediscover joy in such a simple act as playing with the tennis ball filled me with hope. Perhaps, I thought, this newfound connection could be the beginning of something extraordinary. After bringing Reggie home, I decided to take a closer look at his collar. The worn brass tag caught my attention once again, its surface edged with a message that sent a chill down my spine. Reggie belonged to a father who lost his son. My heart sank. The revelation hit me like a freight train, crashing into every corner of my mind. How could someone have abandoned such a loving creature? Had they truly been unable to cope with their loss, or had they simply given up on hope? The thought weighed heavily on me as I stared at Reggie, who sat quietly beside me, his cloudy eye reflecting the weight of history. The discovery filled me with sorrow, but it also ignited a fierce determination within me. Here was a dog who had suffered unimaginable pain loss, abandonment, loneliness, and yet he still carried himself with dignity. Could I heal the scars that time had not erased? Could I be the person to help him reclaim some semblance of joy? These questions haunted me, keeping me awake at night. I wondered if I was capable of filling the void left by the loss of his original family. Would Reggie forgive me for the mistakes of others? Each day brought new challenges. Reggie's demeanor remained guarded, his movements deliberate, as though he were testing the waters of this unfamiliar world. I tried everything I could think of to ease his transition: soft chews, gentle pats, and even a small, worn-out tennis ball that I found in Rusty's old box. Yet, despite my efforts, Reggie continued to withdraw into himself. There were moments when I doubted whether I had made the right choice. What if I wasn't enough? What if Reggie's pain was too deep for me to reach? One evening, as I sat on the couch reading the newspaper, Reggie lay at my feet, his tail thumping softly against the hardwood floor. I absent-mindedly scratched his ears, feeling a pang of guilt for failing to give him what he needed. Then, without warning, he stood up, walked to the corner of the room, and urinated on the carpet. My heart sank. I had read about this behavior in dogs who had experienced trauma, but seeing it firsthand was devastating. I cleaned the mess, trying to remain calm, but inside, I felt defeated. Was I doing more harm than good? Despite these setbacks, something inside me refused to give up. Reggie's presence in my life had already begun to change me, teaching me patience and humility. I reminded myself that healing takes time, especially for a dog who had endured so much. I resolved to be patient, to offer Reggie the love and stability he deserved, even if it meant waiting years for progress. And slowly, ever so slowly, things began to improve. Even with the best care, Reggie still struggled with health issues brought on by his age and past trauma. There were days when he refused to eat, opting instead to lie listlessly in his favorite spot by the window. Other times, he would shuffle slowly around the house, his steps unsteady and his head drooping with exhaustion. The sight of his limp tail and clouded eye broke my heart, and I began to wonder if I had the patience or even the right to endure his decline. Was I prepared to watch him suffer? Could I offer him the comfort he needed when I couldn't fix what was wrong? Some nights I stayed up late, holding his paw in mine, willing him to regain strength. Other days I simply sat beside him, stroking his fur and murmuring reassurances, hoping he understood how deeply I cared. There were moments when Reggie's condition worsened and I feared the worst. One particularly difficult morning, I found him collapsed on the living room floor, panting heavily and trembling. My stomach churned with worry. I called the vet immediately, explaining the situation. The doctor advised caution, suggesting tests to rule out serious illnesses. For a brief moment, panic gripped me. What if this was the end? What if I had misjudged my ability to handle his needs? I spent hours researching treatments, reading articles on geriatric care, and consulting with other dog owners. Each suggestion felt like a lifeline, yet none seemed guaranteed. The days dragged on, and Reggie's condition fluctuated. Some mornings, he would perk up enough to join me for a short walk, his tail wagging weakly as he sniffed at the grass. Other times, he would refuse to leave his bed, curling into a tight ball and letting out a mournful groan. I tried everything I could think of to encourage him: soft shoes, warm blankets, and even the old tennis ball that had once brought him joy. But nothing seemed to pierce through the fog of his despair. I began to doubt whether my efforts were making any difference at all. On one particularly gloomy afternoon, I sat on the porch with Reggie by my side, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. The wind carried the scent of autumn leaves, a reminder of how fleeting life could be. Reggie rested his head on my lap, his breathing shallow and labored. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought about all the times we had shared, the laughter, the quiet moments, and the unspoken bond between us. Would this be the last time I could hold him like this? I clutched his paw tighter, vowing to stay by his side no matter what. One day, something remarkable happened. Reggie appeared at a reading session for children with reading anxiety. These were young souls struggling with the simplest of tasks, their faces etched with frustration as they stumbled over words and sentences. The room buzzed with nervous energy, the kind that makes your palms sweat and your heart race. I watched as the librarian began the session, encouraging the children to pick up books and read aloud. At first, the kids hesitated, their voices trembling, their eyes darting nervously around the room. But then something extraordinary occurred. Reggie, who had been quietly sitting by my side, stood up and walked over to the group. He didn't bark or interrupt. Instead, he simply sat down, his presence filling the space like a calming force. The children's reactions were immediate. One little girl, who had been clutching her book tightly, relaxed visibly. Her shoulders dropped and her grip loosened. Another boy, whose face had been pinched with anxiety, let out a sigh. Reggie didn't move, didn't make a sound, but his mere presence seemed to soothe their fears. Over time, the children began to focus on their reading, their voices steadier, their expressions calmer. It was as though Reggie had become a silent guardian, a shield against the chaos of their minds. Word of Reggie's success spread quickly. Teachers, parents, and counselors alike marveled at the transformation. Here was a dog who didn't need words to communicate. He didn't have to teach, persuade, or explain. He simply existed, and in doing so, he became a symbol of peace and love. Children who once dreaded reading sessions now eagerly awaited them, drawn by the comforting presence of Reggie. Parents reported that their children seemed more relaxed at home, their anxieties easing in the aftermath of these sessions. For me, it was a profound realization. Reggie had transcended his role as a companion and become a beacon of hope. He had shown me that sometimes the most powerful connections are the quietest ones. His ability to calm and reassure was nothing short of miraculous. In that moment, I understood why Reggie had been sent to me, not just to heal my own wounds, but to help others heal theirs. As Reggie grew older, his body weakened, requiring more care than ever before. Nights became increasingly difficult. His breathing grew shallow, his movements sluggish, and his appetite dwindled. One particularly harsh winter night, Reggie collapsed in his favorite spot by the window. I rushed to his side, my heart pounding in my chest. He lay there, his fur matted and damp from the cold, his breathing ragged and labored. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I reached out to hold his paw. The room was silent except for the sound of his labored breathing, each breath a struggle against the inevitable. Reggie looked up at me with his cloudy eye, his expression calm despite the pain. I squeezed his paw gently, tears streaming down my face. "Stay with me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Please, just stay with me." His tail twitched slightly, as if acknowledging my words, but he didn't move again. The hours passed slowly, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I stayed by his side, clutching his paw, willing him to fight, to hold on just a little longer. But as the night wore on, his breathing grew weaker, shallower. Finally, he let out one last long exhale, and then stillness. The room seemed to shrink around me, the cold biting at my skin. I cried uncontrollably, my body racked with sobs. I had known this day would come, but nothing could have prepared me for the raw ache of losing him. Reggie had been more than just a dog. He had been my companion, my confidant, my anchor in life. His absence left a void that no amount of time could fill. That night, Reggie passed away quietly, leaving behind not just a memory, but an indelible mark on everyone who had known him. News of his death spread quickly through the community. People came by the house to pay their respects, bringing flowers, cards, and stories of how Reggie had touched their lives. At the library, the children who had once read to him gathered in the corner, their eyes red-rimmed from crying. The staff at Maple Pines spoke fondly of the days Reggie had spent visiting George, how he had brought a sense of peace to the residents. Even the veterans at the center remembered him fondly, his quiet presence a source of comfort. The funeral was simple but beautiful. Friends and neighbors gathered in the backyard, under the maple tree where Reggie loved to sit. I placed his brass tag at the base of the stone marker, inscribed with the words, "If you're reading this, I was loved once." Below it, I added a new line, "and loved again." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the crowd, I felt a strange sense of peace. Reggie had left behind a legacy of kindness, a reminder that even the smallest acts of love can ripple outward, touching countless lives. After Reggie passed away, I opened the journal I had been keeping and began to write down every memory I had of him. Each page filled with stories of his quiet wisdom, his gentle patience, and the countless moments he had touched my life. I wrote about the way he had sat with crying children, the way he had leaned against lonely residents at Maple Pines, and the way he had become a bridge between strangers in the library. Each entry was a reminder of how Reggie had transformed not only my life, but the lives of everyone he had met. Word of Reggie's legacy spread quickly through the community. People who had once doubted the bond between humans and animals began to see the truth in what Reggie had shown them. Mothers told me how Reggie had calmed their anxious children, while teachers spoke of the courage he had inspired in their students. At the Veteran Center, Hal proudly displayed the plaque that read "Reggie the Listener," a testament to the quiet strength Reggie had brought to the room. Even the simplest interaction seemed to carry weight now. A woman stopped me one day to share how Reggie had given her permission to grieve openly, allowing her to feel the weight of her loss without shame. Another man approached me, his voice trembling, to tell me how Reggie had reminded him of the joy in small moments, like the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. It was as though Reggie had woven himself into the fabric of our lives, leaving a thread of connection that could not be unraveled. In the weeks that followed, I found myself surrounded by stories. People came to me with letters, photos, and memories of Reggie, each one a piece of the tapestry Reggie had created. I realized then that Reggie had not just been a dog. He had been a teacher, a healer, and a symbol of hope. His passing had left a void, but it had also sparked a movement of love and understanding.